Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 122 of the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. I'm going to be going to do an interview with the author of the book Migrating to Prison and discussing the, immigration prison industrial complex and the effects it has on U.S. society, finances, the people, and everything like that. It's an interesting interview, and I do recommend getting the book that we discuss. You'll hear more about at the interview. But before we start, I was really excited with some news that came, and I just had to share it with you. I started a program called Champions for Freedom because I really want immigration lawyers to have their independence and individual freedom financially so that they could do the good work that they can do and not be, stressed out about work or employers and all that kind of stuff. And a major part of that is a digital marketing program that I have that I use to be able to be a successful immigration attorney, both financially and in other ways. And one of my students told me this was an immigration attorney doing it for just as long as I have, and she had been doing the traditional method of face-to-face kind of stuff and networking and speaking at events and churches, that kind of stuff, and really getting the tough, hard, complicated removal cases that were a lot of work. And she loved it. She works with a passion. She's helped the community. She teaches and all that kind of stuff. But she wanted to get out there and get the kind of cases, that I like to get, and to distribute the burden of the practice, the different kinds of cases, even marriage cases, adjustment cases that are more straightforward, that are really helping people as a concierge service get through it. And she signed up for the program, and it's an expensive program, it'd be 4 to 5 digit dollars in the thousands for the program. And within 3 months, she didn't even do a lot of the things I told her to do, like a fraction of them, and she doubled the amount of the course, not only paid for the course, but doubled that in income just within 3 months. And what's going to happen is, with the stuff she's built, as she builds on it with the other stuff in the program, that's going to be a six-figure salary just coming in perpetuity as long as she just keeps it up. So it's amazing. So I want to share that information with you as possible. If you're interested, just give me an email, info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com, and we could have a call to discuss what it entails, how it looks, and it varies depending on the state you're in and your background, the kind of case you want to do. So I really have to know more about what your goals are and what your background is to see if it fits you. So just give me an email. Again, it's info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com. I want to see you succeed, and then work together so we can do some interesting stuff with the toolbox, with the different programs I want to help build immigration lawyers. And along with that, the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox Facebook page was created. So if you're a practicing private immigration attorney, please send me an email, connect with me, so that I can add you to the Facebook page, where I post a lot of information there, and you can see the kind of work I'm doing and take part of it in it as well. I guess with that, let's get it started. Welcome to the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. I am the host, Attorney John Khosravi, and I practice U.S. immigration law exclusively. For more information about the program, please visit www.immigrationlawyerspodcast.com. Please note that this recording is informational only and does not constitute legal advice. Please consult with a licensed attorney for specific legal guidance that suits your case. Also, this recording is copyrighted, and written permission is required for rebroadcasting. For more information about me, please visit www.jqqlaw.com. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. I'm really happy and proud to have a great immigration scholar, immigration attorney, César Cuauhtémoc García Hernández. César wrote a wonderful book, which I do endorse at reading. It's just every page of it has information. And if you're listening to this podcast, you're into immigration law and history and all this kind of stuff. The book is Migrating to Prison: America's Obsession with Locking Up Immigrants. So it's a must read. The more we support other immigration attorneys, especially, the better it is, and to get the word out. César is also a professor of immigration law at the University of Denver and a immigration practitioner. And he has the domain name crimmigration.com, which kudos for snatching that up. How long ago did you buy the domain?
I bought that, I want to say 2009. So it's been about a yeah, it's been a decade now.
That's
Or
smart.
2008, 2009. Yeah.
I mean, for immigration practitioner, it's smart. I'm not sure how much the SEO value and all that stuff is, but like when I see crimmigration, like, you got that one word, nice. Okay, so I'll just get it started. Could you let us know about yourself, where you grew up, and what took you this route to become an immigration attorney,
Okay.
immigration professor, immigration author?
Yeah. Funny story actually. I bought that, and you're after being on vacation with my then girlfriend, I think, now wife, and we were in a basement bar in Monterrey in Mexico, and I thought, I'm doing this work down in South Texas, where I was born and raised, and I was representing people who were primarily, most of my practice was representing people who were in removal proceedings, but were locked up, were detained in some of the large immigration prisons down there, and mostly after having encountered the criminal justice system in one way or another. And so I've had this sort of long-standing interest in immigration work as a child of South Texas. And as I grew up and left South Texas for many years, and I became interested in criminal defense work as well. So I ended up back in South Texas practicing law, doing this work, and we were down just after the holidays actually, in Monterrey, and on vacation, and we were in this bar that I'll never forget. It was called La Monjas, the nuns, and the decorations were entirely in character. It was just like painting after painting after painting of nuns, this basement, right? So just imagine like really dark, and you saw how all these images of nuns just staring at you while you're drinking beer. And so I'm having this conversation with her about sort of like our future, right? And one of the things I say, well, like I realized that there's this concept out there called there's this word called crimmigration. Like, well, what is that? Like, that's not a word. No, there is. I read this article called The Crimmigration Crisis by this professor at Lewis and Clark named Julia Stump. And I read it, and when I was reading it, I thought, this is exactly what I do. This is exactly the practice area that I have. So that's after the vacation, I went on and I said, you know what, I'm gonna buy this URL and start blogging. And so I did. And so that was many years ago. But that was sort of the beginning of my practice area is very much sort of centered in the beginning of my life and my family's life in this community in South Texas, which is very much a bicultural, bilingual, binational community. And it's one where I still have strong ties. I was there a few weeks ago.
Oh, wonderful. So, okay, you grew up there, and what caused you to go to law school? Was it early on you decided to be a lawyer?
No, I'm a contrarian by nature, and so I was as I was going through undergrad, yeah, I thought I really enjoy teaching. I was fortunate to be teaching adult English language learners in Providence, Rhode Island, and which is where I was going to college, and so I was dealing primarily with immigrants, and but I really enjoyed being in front of a classroom, and so I thought, I want to teach, and so I started teaching sixth graders, and I realized I liked the teaching, but not so much the sixth graders. Um, and in fairness to them, I think they felt very much the same way about me. And so that's when I kept thinking, okay, well, so I really enjoy teaching, but I'm also really struggling with the fact that my students, my kids, my sixth graders, like the adults I was teaching before, are all encountering very systemic problems about engaging with the legal system in one way or another, immigration or criminal justice system, what have you, or just sort of dealing with the landlords, dealing with school issues, and I was seeing the limitations of being able to do that work one on one. And so that's when I sort of took a step back and I thought, okay, well, I've had this longstanding interest in law. I think where I'm at now is at the point of saying, all right, I really want to do this. I really want to become a lawyer to address some of these issues that I've been seeing with my students, my adult students, and my adolescent students more systematically. And so that's when I decided to become a lawyer. But that lingering interest in teaching very much never left me. And but I didn't think it was possible to do two I'd never known a law professor. I'd never really contemplated the existence of law professors until I got to law school. And then at some point I realized early on, like, hey, those people are doing exactly what, like, they've managed to marry my two interests. And that's when I really decided I want to figure out how to do that. And so from very early on in my time in law school, I started talking to my professors about the pathway, and started to put myself on that trajectory. And I was fortunate to be able to then make it happen after after several years.
Wonderful. And so how was it when you were practicing? So you probably did removal proceedings with immigration stuff, or you also did criminal proceedings as well?
Yeah, it was primarily doing removal proceeding work. Yeah.
Interesting. And what years was the big times that you were doing removal?
Oh man, you're asking me to
The
go
Obama
back.
administration?
Yeah, oh yeah, that was the Obama administration. Actually,
You
the
must have been
beginnings
busy.
of the Obama administration. Yeah, 2000. I finished law school in 2007, so 2008, 9, and then I started teaching in January 2010.
And you were doing removal in Texas, or did you have a?
Yeah, mostly in South Texas, in McAllen. I was based in McAllen, Texas, which is where I was born and raised.
Yeah.
And I was working with a law firm, García Attorneys at Law, which the two names in Garcia's, and there are my brothers. So it's a small family law firm that actually, given the work that they do in South Texas, is big by South Texas standards.
And how was I mean, I'm in Los Angeles, and historically the court here was a little more favorable, but like always sounds scary going to immigration anything in Texas. Is that the case? Was it?
Yeah, I think no, that certainly is true. And in particular, there are a number of judges in some of these facilities, in some of these courts, that are notorious for denying respondents. But and that's the pressure is even more intense when you're doing the kind of detained representation work that my brothers still do, that I was doing, and because the stakes are high, people are locked up, and the conditions of representation are just really they're not favorable to being the best lawyer that you can be.
Yeah. Let's talk about, because I have a lot of law students listening to this, and when I did remove, one of the hard parts I had and was just representing people who are detained. When I did that a couple times, driving out, and because they put them out in the most farthest places, the most inconvenient. I mean, it's a prison in a sense, so they do that. And they, no one wants to put a prison mill in Beverly Hills. They're going to put it in somewhere it's cheap and convenient and inexpensive for them, inconvenient for us. But how do you practice when you have to drive all this way out, spend all this time going through security? You're in a room talking to a client with no privacy. How do you share information with the guard just staring at you? Have you ever a situation where a guard took that information and used it against you? Does that stuff happen?
I'm sure that happens. I've never personally encountered that situation, but I think everything else that you're saying is certainly true. Where you're talking to clients after having spent sometimes quite literally hours just trying to get to the facility, and then having to navigate the layers of security to get from the parking lot to your client, and the whole time you're at the mercy of the staff, of the guards, right? And so you need to maintain a good relationship with those folks, because they're the people who decide there's a lockdown, and then you're just sitting there, right? With nothing to do, because a lot of times you're going to have a struggle just to get your laptop into the facility, to get your phone in the facility, right? These like basic tools of just professional work in 2020 in the United States, right? Nothing specific to removal defense or detain work, just work, period. And they also have power over your clients. And so you need to be sure that what you're doing isn't going to negatively affect what the situation that they find themselves in, which is necessarily a poor one, because they're locked up, but you don't want to do anything that's going to make it worse. All of those things are disincentives, to people doing detained work, and they're real, and I don't think they're coincidental at all. I think that this is part of why we see that some of the largest facilities in the ICE network are in places like South Texas, where you can have a law firm of half a dozen lawyers be, you know, a big presence on the removal stage, because there are just so few lawyers who are willing to do that kind of work, and the economics of it are poor.
So how do you charge? Because just the drive itself, it costs a lot of money to see the people, and they don't have money. Do you kind of pack them up, or you try to see 5 people at once, or is that even possible?
Yeah, no, that's what you try to do, right? You try to organize your day so that you're making you're seeing as many people in as few visits as possible, knowing that you're going to be going out there quite often, several times a week, but you still you're talking to prospective clients, right? You're talking to your actual clients who just, you know, if you're preparing some brief or something along those lines, and then you're talking to the folks who have hearings coming up. But and all the while, you're trying to keep in mind that these are folks who are not working, which means that they don't have an income. So whatever money that they have to pay you is most often coming from their families and their spouses, their kids, parents, whatever the situation is, who are in most circumstances also not people with a lot of means. And so you try to be respectful of that, responsible of that, but also be respectful of your staff, of yourself, right? And making sure that, you know, your staff is compensated well. And the reality is that you're whoever's providing you with electricity to your office, they don't care about how long it takes to get to your clients. You know, the bills expect to get paid.
I find what happens is the lawyers themselves are the one get sacrificed here, where it's just you sometimes don't make money on these cases. It's just really you do it because you have to do it, or some motion need pops up, you have to do a quick motion, and you just don't get paid on it, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think at some point, though, if this is the kind of work that you do as your primary practice area, you know, you obviously have to figure out what the economics of it are. And I think the reality is that these tend to be cases that pay little, and so you have to have a lot of them. And so I'm certainly very much very sympathetic to concerns about the quality of representation that attorneys are providing to clients, in particular to detained clients who have limited options or sort of a captive audience in a way. But I'm also very skeptical of that, because I think that the lawyers who are doing that kind of work are participating in a framework that is actually designed to make sound representation really difficult, because of all of these obstacles to representing detainees, and I think we need to have people in those facilities as eyes and ears. These are places that are almost off limits to almost everyone else, and so those of us who are in the legal profession, I think, need to certainly, you know, make sure that the standards are of adequate representation, the competent representation, are being met, that people aren't getting scammed. But at the same time, we also have to recognize the lawyers who commit themselves to doing this work, by and large, are people who are doing it for the right reasons. And but they're also caught up in a pretty lousy process in which it's actually hard to maintain a financially stable practice.
I mean, I've found lawyers who do it start out good, but after years they get burned out. And I've had one say they hate what they do, they're stuck into it now. They loved it at first and helping, but there's only so many denials and so many families being torn apart where you just emotionally have to detach yourself from it. And then there's some people who just take advantage, so they know they can make a bunch of money on volume. And the case is denied, they could always say, well, you didn't have a good case. What are you going to do? You know, it's an easy way out.
Yeah.
So it's a nasty situation. And we have, because of the long drive, there's a good chunk of the listeners to this podcast are driving to the jail right now. So when they listen to this, they'll really resonate with them. it just definitely working on. It's like, how do you make that system better? I don't even know. Like, you can't bring the jails closer. That's not going to happen. Your solution of just not locking up in this way is good. I saw a tweet on Twitter yesterday, and I didn't check it for facts that you may have known, but they had that system TRAC, TRAC, which deals with immigration court hearings and stuff. And they said, like, someone posted a stat that 99% of the asylum cases in the U.S. Recently they checked showed up to their hearing, even if they weren't detained. And the big scare they have about the need for immigration prisons is they're not going to show up to their court hearings. You have to do that. But like almost every asylum person showed up. Did you see that stat? Do you know if it's true?
Yeah, I did. I saw the report that TRAC put out yesterday. TRAC is a fabulous organization. What they do is they use FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, which is a standard tool in every immigration lawyer's toolkit. And they get government data about all kinds of things, including a large amount of their work is about immigration stuff. And they actually have this one fellow who I've known for many years now, since he was actually a master's student. He's got his PhD now. Who's specifically working on their immigration data, and so they're just crunching government stats essentially when they issue these reports. And what their latest report that was released yesterday found is that almost every single person whose asylum application was cited in 2019. In 2019 fiscal year, I think it was, showed up to their court dates. That is, the in absentia number of in absentia orders was something in like 1%, like 1.1% or something like that.
That's crazy. That's like I mean, that's like, it's, statistics is, in these kind of matters, to be conclusive is like, it's hard, but it's like, dude, 99%, essentially 1%. They probably just got lost and didn't show up on the way there, the 1%.
Right. And as we all know, right, I've had clients who are facing an essential orders, is that, sometimes it's because people just decide they're not going to show up. A lot of times it's because people don't know when they're supposed to show up. They didn't get the notice. Their car broke down on the way there. Their kid got sick. All of these are reasons for inessential orders, right? Which most of these don't make any sense, right? You should have some ability to, take into account that you're dealing with human beings, right, who have all kinds of things that come up in their lives. But an immigration court has a knack for not doing that. One of the things that I found most interesting about that TRAC data, the TRAC report that was released yesterday, was that if you look down at the number of people whose asylum applications were decided in 2019 and who had been detained and then released, it's also 99% of those people showed up to all the court dates. Meaning, at one point, ICE decided, oh no, these people they should be locked up. Right? They're gonna flee if we don't lock them up, or they're gonna endanger somebody if we don't lock them up. Right? Those are the two criteria that ICE is supposed to use. Well, and so they did, and then they got released probably because an immigration judge issued a bond, and then they were still showing up to all of their hearings. I think that's different from just the overall number, which is going to include some people who were never detained to begin with, right? So if you look at the people who ICE made a decision to say, we're going to lock these people up, these people deserve to be locked up, and IJ comes in and says, no, actually, we're gonna give them a bond. They pay the bond, get out, and they still showed up.
It just popped in my head. There's cases that pop up where superior court, just state court judges, even federal court judges, but they get busted that they're working with incarceration agencies in a corrupt way to do that. Has it ever happened that where they busted an ICE, an IJ, not to disrespectful, but busted an IJ that had some relationship with these, private prisons and stuff like that? I don't think I would have heard about it if it happened, but there is this
I
crazy.
don't know of that. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know of that. What we do see is the relationship between high level Department of Homeland Security staff and the private prison companies. That's more common, right? But that is sort of the ordinary revolving door that
Yeah. Well, the biggest
problem that
example,
happens.
former DHS head who became chief of staff of President Trump, he didn't even wait like any time. He was like, okay, I'm on the board now. I'm making money, so
Yeah,
switched over
yeah.
really quick. But that's to be expected. That's how the nature, and that's why I talk about show. I don't have much faith in politics and government and voting anymore. And I get pushback. I'm not a lot. People get offended, but I'm like, this is a game. Like, I really think
Yeah.
like the things we do, you write your book, with you're talking with your students, the communication we have that other listeners listen to, that changes the culture of society more, and it has more effect than voting and stuff like that. And one way or another, they're always these interests get their way. It's really hard for the people to succeed in that area.
Yeah, I think there is something to the fact that cultural norms have to change if political norms are going to change, right? If what we imagine is politically possible is going to change, then there has to be along with that a cultural expectation that what we're doing now is is not is not sustainable.
Yeah.
And so these two things I don't think can go can be divorced from one another, which is why I think as lawyers, yeah, it's really easy to think that yeah the best solution is always within the legal system.
Yeah.
There's something romantic about that. But I think the reality is what we're concerned about is sort of the scale of an immigration prison system that runs that holds 400,000 or 500,000 people every year. Then you're not gonna make a serious inroad in that one case at a time. This is a much broader issue that reflects of a political willingness to rely on prisons to to um, to control immigrants, and that's a political question much more than it is a legal question.
Yeah, but the politics, I think politics to a large extent reflect the public itself. So politicians kind of adjust what the public thinks. When you look at same-sex marriage, the public finally made a decision that like 51% doesn't have a problem with gay people getting married, and then the politics reflected that. And so it's a top-down versus a bottom-down approach. It is kind of elitist too, because lawyers are like, okay, we'll go to the top, we'll hobnob with some lobbyists and stuff, we'll try to change the stuff. But just as it go our way, go against us too, whatever our beliefs is when you go there. But like what you did, write a book that goes in the hands of a first level influencer you are writing the book, goes into a second level influencer, which is me getting the podcast out. Then third level, these lawyers, and then they tell their clients and talk. It's a more longer game to play. It's harder. It's more work, but that is going to turn it. And like, for example, one of the big problems is for these prisons is some communities get the prison and then that becomes their lifeblood for money coming to them. And so for them their politicians are never going to let that go, and they're going to find ways to fill up that prison as much as possible. And that's a big problem that we have. But finding ways to help communities on a local level to find alternatives, or even us thinking like, okay, there's a prison community. How can we band together, maybe find it is kind of far out way to think, but it's popped in my head, but how can we support this community so they don't have to rely on the income of some prison, and maybe some other way to do it. Maybe we could have some sort of Coachella event at that there once a year, so a bunch of money goes there all of a sudden, and they don't have to rely on imprisonment to support themselves. Just a really far out kind of ways of thinking that's community and people based, not thinking about how's Washington going to send them money.
But I think I completely agree with that. But I think before you even get to that point, so the concrete policy response, I think when we're talking about the impact that immigration prisons have on the United States as a whole, I think it's important, yes, to talk about the impact that they have on the people who are locked up, on the families of those individuals, right? but I think it's also important to recognize that their staff who are running these facilities on a daily basis, and for whom working there is almost never a question of politics. It's a question of jobs,
Yeah.
right? It's a question of working to sustain yourself, your family, right? And lots of people would just as well take a job someplace else,
Yeah.
right?
There's no passion to go be a prison guard. Very rare to
it's a hard job.
Yeah.
That's a hard job, right? It is. You're in a
Yeah.
prison. You are in a prison. Just because you're the guard and not the inmate, I mean, you're still in a prison while you're on the clock. And so I think those of us who are talking about the problems of immigration prisons, also I think it is on us to recognize that these are real people who are depending on these facilities for their livelihoods, and we shouldn't in any way denigrate them or diminish the impact that this job has on their life, and the fact that if you close down this facility, they're going to be out of work, and so they are invested in this facility running because they're invested in themselves, and so we have to think creatively about how to encourage their local elected officials, their state elected officials, to invest in alternatives, in alternative forms of economic activity in those communities.
I mean, there was a great quote in your book where I think it was in Legacy INS existed, in the office of OBM, what is the Office of Something in Management or something. They said that if we create these prisons, the incentive is to just keep packing them full of people. And I'm paraphrasing what the quote was, but that's the case. Once you build it, they'll come, and then it's a snowball. You need to fill it up. And I see these contracts that these private prisons have where they're mandated have a certain level of fulfillment unless there's penalties for not doing this. So it's crazy incentives for the idea of locking human beings up in a prison, especially when they're non-violent criminals. It's just mind-blowing, non-violent people being locked up.
Well, so the way that those incentives those guarantees work is that they actually, the contracts between the federal government and the facility operator means that the government has to pay the operator for usually like 90% capacity, even if 100% of the beds are empty. Right, you can have 0 people in there; they're going to still be getting at least 90% paid at least as if 90% of the beds were full. So of course, the incentive for the government is to keep 90% of the beds or more full because that's what you're on the hook for. And so once you open the facility, it's hard to close it down. It's a lot easier to keep a facility from opening than it is to shut down a facility, because at that point you've got 250 people who are relying on that place for their jobs, right? And as you said earlier, a lot of these places are in small rural parts of the country, where a 250 person employer is an enormous presence in the local economy, right? And so I think we absolutely can't overlook that. At the same time, we need to recognize the fact that these are decisions being made by economics and by politics, and not by anything related to the actual immigrants who are being locked up, right? Not to their dangerousness, not to their flight risk propensity, or not to promoting the rule of law and the operation of the immigration law system.
Now, what's the dollar? Is there an estimate of how much per day these lockups cost U.S. taxpayers?
Yeah, the estimates vary a lot depending on the kind of facility. So the ICE, for example, runs facilities that are for adults only. It also runs facilities that are for families. The facilities for families are upward of $200 a day per bed per person. The facilities for adults are closer to about $130, $140 a day per person. So there is and that's per person across the entire network. In some places, the costs is going to be higher because they're in higher cost of living, areas, than in places like Florence or Eloy, Arizona, where land is cheap. But I think so. So over the course of 2017, for example, Congress gave ICE $2.7 billion dollars to run its detention system. That's a substantial amount of money. And one of the things that I propose in Migrating to Prison in the book is that, instead of spending that money on locking up people, we can spend that money on on supporting, on propping up the immigration court system. And that's going to promote the rule of law.
Itself. If you don't have the backlogs, you don't need that much incarceration.
Yeah, if you don't have the backlogs, then doing something about the backlogs does a lot to promote the rule of law. Because the backlogs are just, no one likes the backlogs. Lawyers don't like the backlogs. Judges don't like the backlogs. They're not working. They don't work for anyone. But they're a natural result of years and their Republican and Democratic administrations pouring money into ICE, so the enforcement and the Border Patrol and CBP, the enforcement side of the immigration system, and not doing the same thing on the adjudication side. Right? The immigration courts are, immigration judges run their own recording systems in lots of these places, right? They don't have enough law clerks to do legal research to make good, well-reasoned decisions in a timely fashion, right? And so they're doing a lot of that work on their own, and these are high-stakes proceedings, and all of that subverts the quality of the adjudication that we get from the immigration courts, which is problematic. Should be problematic for anyone who's concerned about the rule of law in the United States.
One thing that concerns me, whenever they release these lists of new IJs or immigration judges that come up, there'll be people who have never practiced immigration law on that list.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, this is one of the hardest areas of law that's possible. All I do is think about all day is immigration, and I don't do removal, and I just study it to know it. I'm like, this is really complicated stuff to know all the different aspects of it. It's so easy to make a mistake. And if you don't have a law clerk there pushing it, your lawyer's not on top of it fully or misses something, it's so easy for misjustice to happen or due process not to happen. A little due process there is in the immigration system.
Yeah, we certainly see that problem is certainly a real problem, in which because these are not Article 3 judges, they don't go through the Senate presidential nomination and Senate confirmation process. A lot of times they're political appointments, and but aside from that, we also see that there's a pretty sharp skew toward people who have prosecutorial experience working for ICE, and while that certainly doesn't raise the same concern about sort of the lack of knowledge of immigration law that you identified, it does also mean that the immigration judge bench tends to be skewed toward folks who have a prosecutorial mindset, which is very different from a defense mindset.
Yeah, I mean, there's one is they don't deal with the humanity of the people that they're dealing with. They don't have clients. They're dealing with, they represent the state, so they don't feel that, and it calls into question impartiality when you have, the judge and the ICE prosecutor. They might have just been buddies that they've been working together. All of a sudden, they just go. So it's a 2-on-1 situation there that unfortunately, and it creates a questionable to be impartial in that sense. And I always call in question whether it could be even judges when they're Department of Justice employees. And there's a lot of good IJs. I mean, the head of the union is in Los Angeles. She's a wonderful judge. She's a hard judge, but strict. But she's a good person. I've met her, talked with her. But it has this Article 3 situation that I think is a key aspect, that immigration judges have to be real judges. And not to be too offensive to them, but not a real judge if that's the way it is right now. It has to be an Article 3 judge because
Yeah.
it's people's
Well,
life
and
process.
I think the other thing that you get when under the current framework where they're employees of the Justice Department is pressure,
Yeah.
internal pressure from headquarters, from the political appointees who are actually running the Justice Department, whether it's the Attorney General or the head of the Executive Office for Immigration Review,
Mm-hmm.
about things as basic as how many cases you have to decide in a given fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
We as lawyers, as law students, and certainly as judges, the concern is justice. It's not
Yeah.
quantity, right? It's not numbers for the sake of numbers. That is a sign of a paper mill, right? It just moving through people, moving through cases as if they don't involve people, as if they don't
Soviet
involve
type system.
complicated human beings
Yeah, the
and
Soviet
complicated legal
courts,
systems.
where
Yeah,
they would have just the Soviet Union when they'd have courts that would just show it's okay, just go through the process and then kick him out. Don't really ask questions. And now they're working on decertifying the union. I mean, they're doing everything they
yeah,
can to crush. As hard as it's been on the immigrants and on immigration lawyers, what I've seen is on every level of the employees of the immigration system, the judges in EOIR, ICE employees just got their overtime pay shot down a couple months ago. They said you can't do overtime in a certain way. USCIS, they're taking away their benefits. They're crushing them and overwhelming them with work. CBP leaving in droves. Officers committing suicide can't reach their hiring standards. They're getting crushed in the media. So I think the mindset of this administration is not to fix immigration like that. It's just to destroy immigration on every aspect as possible. So there's no immigration. It's kind of like is insane in a civilized society to stop the movement of people in any way.
mm-hmm.
But it's what they're doing. And the employees themselves, I think they're kind of opening their eyes. Like, listen, we've been going along with this system way too long. We got to just think about the whole thing. Like, it doesn't make any sense. None of it makes any sense.
Sorry about that. Yeah. No, I think one of the big concerns I have is the attack that the Trump administration is spearheading against the National Association of Immigration Judges, the union that represents the immigration judges, because the immigration judge union has a longstanding history of identifying key failures in the way that the immigration court system operates, and proposing remedies. And these are people who are in the trenches every single day, right? Who have a particular perspective, to be sure, one that's different from you, one that's different from me as a lawyer, as a professor. But one that is incredibly invaluable because they're doing this work. And time and time again, what we see is that the problems that the judges union identifies are really are not only glaring, but they really go to the heart of their ability to make the right legal decisions,
Yeah.
right? As opposed to just make a decision. Right? It's easy to make a decision, but what we should be concerned about is whether the judges are applying the law to the facts, right? And whether they have the support to do that. Part of that involves making sure that the parties before you, the government and the respondents, are fully capable of giving the court the information that the judges need. And that's almost impossible if you have a situation like we do in when we're dealing with detained individuals these days, where most of them don't have a lawyer. Most of them are standing in front of the immigration judge by themselves. They're not going to be able to navigate the aggravated felony definition of illicit trafficking in the controlled substance, right? They're not going to be able to put together a cancellation for removal,
Or asylum defense.
removal petition, or right, navigate the stop time rule, or an asylum petition based on a membership in a particular social group. And so the judge is left in a position of saying, well, I've got to make a decision on this because that's what my supervisors tell me I need to do. And those of us who are on the outside can just say, well, no, that person was ordered removed. that person had an opportunity to request asylum in the U.S. and lost. The reality is that if you're not getting a meaningful opportunity to engage with the law and with the neutral judge, and it's close to no opportunity, and that's the reality that we're seeing in immigration courts across the country these days, in particular when we're dealing with people who are detained.
And because of the need to just make decisions, because they have a guy standing over their shoulder saying make a decision on a certain number. The next step is appealing it, going to BIA, and now we're seeing the BIA is new decisions saying they don't have to even explain why they deny stuff. There's some crazy BIA rulings coming out or powers coming in for them just willy-nilly shoot things down without really even more due process.
Yeah, and I think this is something that is happening a lot, where we're just getting to the point where people are where the BIA is getting so much pressure from the Attorney General, from political appointees within the Justice Department, and is really being reshaped because of the way the people who are being appointed to the BIA. That we are seeing that the BIA is not at all a welcoming venue for migrants, and so that raises the importance of the courts of appeal. But the reality is that most people can't afford to keep fighting to that point. And so that's why one of the proposals I make in Migrating to Prison is that, look, if we're spending 2.7 billion or so every single year on locking up migrants, instead, what we should do is spend a good chunk of that on lawyers, on immigration lawyers, on social workers. Immigration lawyers are going to be able to identify the best legal claim that somebody has, and whereas social workers and caseworkers are going to be able to make sure that people have some amount of stability in their lives when they're going through a high stakes, what's inherently a high stakes, high pressure, high stress legal process, and that could involve things as basic as making sure that they know when their next court date is, so that they're not getting an absentia order, making sure that they know how to navigate the bus system, right? If you're dealing with an asylum applicant who's only been in the U.S. for a few months, and may not know how to navigate the mass transit.
I mean, LA, I still have been here for my life. I can't figure out the bus here. So that's hard.
Yeah, right.
There was that decision, BI decision came out, I think yesterday before, where they don't have to put the address of the court on the NTA notice. It's just like every little thing they can to really F people. So what is that?
Yeah. Well, we were seeing, unfortunately, in the last few months, instances in which some of these notices are going out with dates that literally don't exist, right? Or with weekends, or instances in which DHS is issuing NTAs, but then not telling the court. So, and this is about a year ago, where all these people showed up, and they showed up on the date they were supposed to, and no one told the court. Right? So the court wasn't expecting these hearings; it wasn't ready to hear them. And then it's just chaos. But it also it's annoying, right? It's inconvenient for all those people. But far more important is that it completely subverts the legitimacy of the process. Right? Why is anyone going to believe the next notice? Why should anyone believe the next notice? It just seems like a kangaroo court.
To a point that comes up on the other side is, at the end of the day, there's laws, and these people are breaking the rules. And if we have a society as rule of law, then we have to stick by it, which I agree with to a large extent. And that's why I push, we got to change the laws if we want to do it. But if the other side is not abiding by the laws either, they're undermining the rule of law just as much as someone who's crossing the border without a proper admission or parole. So it goes both ways. And by these bogus NTAs, you hear stories of, I hate to paint a whole picture of all ICE lawyers, but there's cases where they steal people's social security numbers, and this was the Northwest happened, where a head I saw a lawyer
Yeah.
still running fake ID scams, and it's just all this stuff. Or there was another one which was making stuff up, false evidence into the file. I'm like, how much animosity do they have against the immigrant to make up evidence in a deportation case? They have 1,000 cases. Would they care if one of them that goes this way or that way at a certain point?
Right.
Like, the fabricated evidence.
And also the law is so favorable to the government, right?
Yeah.
And in removal proceedings, it is starting off with the fact that most of these people don't have lawyers.
Yeah.
Already the government, which is represented by a lawyer, is in a more advantageous position.
Mm-hmm.
But then you get to a conflict like an asylum claim where the applicant is expected to produce all kinds of documentary evidence, right? As if the moment that you decide, okay, I'm going to flee for my life because if I don't leave now, I will die. That is open to like gathering all of the necessary documents that you need.
Yeah.
Like that's just not something that happens in those sort of critical moments. So I think for one of my goals in writing migrating to prison is to push back on this notion that enforcement equals promoting the rule of law. Right?
Yeah.
Strong arm enforcement doesn't necessarily promote the rule of law. On the contrary, strong arm enforcement, like immigration prisons and the scale of 500,000 people every year, can actually subvert the rule of law by delegitimizing the process, by pouring a ton of money into an inhumane practice when you have options available to actually ensure that the process works well, and do it in a much more humane fashion. I think legal representation is an enormous component of that, an enormously important component of making sure that the outcomes of the legal proceedings are the outcomes that are required by the law that Congress enacted, and not simply the outcome that poverty dictates. Right?
I think that's probably the best argument, but it's way too sophisticated. It's not make America great again or lock her up, but it's too sophisticated argument. But
I'm not running for president, so I can make a more sophisticated argument.
But that's it. I mean, if you want to have a legitimate country with legitimate laws, everyone has to abide by them, and that streamlines and fixes everything. But it just between lawyers, we can make the argument, and that resonates with me the most. It kind of goes to similar as drug laws. Like we have Nixon busted out this war on drugs, and look, we have like the most high nation in the world. People are dying left in the streets.
Yeah.
It's causing civil war in Mexico. And that causes the immigration crisis. So I always think of immigration crisis, if it is a crisis, as a consequence of other policies. And we're just kind of writing triage, trying to clean it up on the side. But we have all these other bad laws and enforcement, which is the same thing. We have gun running that goes into Mexico by the government that does that.
Right.
We have, the U.S. government selling drugs and CIA is coming out in Texas and also selling all this stuff that they're doing. Creates the problem, which creates other problems. We're all trying to fix, and then we're the bad guys, or the people are the bad guys. And it's a shame that when people fight other people, because the average person that votes and is in support of the inhumane treatment of immigrants is really on the same socioeconomic level as the immigrant themselves. But they always go to this tribe and they follow this hierarchy as leader who's a billionaire, who is a completely different strata, and they made their money in a completely probably in dishonest way. And they resonate with them as being the person that connects with them. But in reality, they're fighting the people that are on the same level as them. And it's a weird system that human beings get in when they go into tribalism and they just look at the other as different. I see this, and they teach us in high school. Like when I was in high school, you're a high school in America too, we have homecoming rallies where we're like, yeah, our school, because of this jurisdiction they wrote, is the best, and the school next door we're going to fight is our enemy. And let's go TP their houses and destroy their statue and hate them. And it's all in fun and jest. But I mean, look at the USC, UCLA stuff. It's I went to UCLA, and it's in fun, but it's kind of serious too. It goes to the next level when you see like the Dodgers and the San Francisco, what was the team? I used to be a big Dodgers fan until this got out of hand, where they go beat up a fan and they cause a guy to go in a coma, and he's got his family and stuff. And it really is like, dude, they're just a baseball team. These are other people watching the game. These are other people trying to make a life there. They did a NAFTA treaty that completely screwed up Mexico. They work with the cartels to undermine the system in Mexico so that Mexico isn't strong enough to be a challenge to America. There's all this kind of stuff that's happening that's above their view. And that's what causes the migration crisis. Let's deal with that stuff. And these people, they come here to work. They're coming. There's better ways of dealing with it. Sorry, I'm going on my own political rant.
Yeah. So I think also what in sort of that vein, I think that there's an important part of this that relates to migrating to prison, and that one of the justifications that we see for locking up people is that they're bad. In one way or another, they're bad. Maybe they got drugs. Maybe they came here without asking for the government's permission, so they didn't get in line, right? Whatever line that is that may or may not exist. And so they're creating problems in one way or another, as if the fact that they create problems makes them worse than those of us who are not subject to immigration law enforcement because we're U.S. citizens. But the reality is, of course, that, as you pointed out, in the U.S., we drug problems are legion, right? We have all kinds of drug problems across the United States, communities large and small. We have violence on a regular basis in communities large and small. And so to turn an entire aspect of the U.S. legal system on the fact that some people are engaging in this activity but they're doing so without the proper piece of paper. It's without the birth certificate that says Texas on it or California on it, right? Or that says naturalization on it. It suggests that there's something worse about engaging in all that activity just because you're not a U.S. citizen, and there's not. Right? That's a fallacy.
He's a former USCIS acting director, now under director, whatever he is. I forgot his name, but the Italian guy. He goes and cherry picks on Twitter to find the most long-winded way. I mean, there was another one recently where there was this one. A black guy in New York who attacked Jewish people on Hanukkah. He's like, well, his parents were immigrants. He was born here,
right.
But I guess they didn't learn how to be American. So I was like, what about the other 1,000 people that are going to school and shooting up people that are American born 7 generations? Like, it's such a long-winded argument. It's just horrible.
Well, but it's an odd. Odd's not even the right word. It's a disturbing definition of American, right?
Yeah.
In which this is imagined, romanticized sense of what it is to be an American. We write in the book that we expect migrants to be the exceptional human beings that we as U.S. citizens are not. And there's one example. Yeah, it's a huge double standard. And there's an example in that of a gentleman who I write about in the book that I think draws this point out really well. Which is a guy named Jerry out of Eagle. Jerry was raised in South Texas, not far from McAllen, where I was raised. And we both went to schools, and we didn't know each other, but we both went to schools in South Texas. And after high school, I went up to college. And Jerry, on the other hand, joined the U.S. Army. Jerry got deployed to Iraq, and he was in a group of tanks that was patrolling through Iraq several years back. And at one point, his tank went over an IED. And the IED blew up the tank, and Jerry's leg was injured, and he suffered PTSD, and so he was sent back to Texas, where he did not get the care that he needed to recover physically or psychologically, and so he started self-medicating in the way that lots of people self-medicate, through drugs.
A lot of former veterans, in particular, especially sure veterans, these wars. Yeah.
This is not at all unique to Jerry, right? And so Jerry eventually, got arrested by the police, and so he's going through the criminal justice system, and he's actually in a special court for vets that was exactly designed based on the recognition that lots of veterans suffer trauma and physical injury in war that then manifests in poor ways when they get back home, right? And so he was going through that process. He was doing what the judge overseeing it expected of him to do. And then all of a sudden he just stopped showing up. And he stopped showing up because ICE had gotten him and sent him to an immigration prison in South Texas because they were trying to deport the guy. Yeah. You know, the thing is, like, Jerry's failures come out of the very directly from the fact that he decided to put his life literally on the line in defense of the United States, right? In support of the United States. Does that mean that his moral claim to belonging in the United States is worse, right? We're willing to trust him with a U.S. Army tank, but then not allow him to live in the United States. Whereas I'm immune from that enforcement because my mom happened to be in Texas when I was born, right? I did not volunteer to join the U.S. Army, right? I went off to college. And I like to think that my contributions and my sense of belonging in the United States has to do with the way I interact with people, the work that I do, right? Not the fact that my mother was in Texas, right? And so Jerry's belonging shouldn't turn on the fact that his mother was not in Texas on the day he was born. And that's exactly, when it comes to immigration law, I write in the book, when it comes to immigration law, what matters isn't the heart, it's the passport. And I think that's fundamentally problematic.
I've always thought being American is an ideal in a way of life. I mean, like when I see in Iran, somebody wants freedom and challenges the regime, that's an American right there. Now, not a U.S. citizen, so you don't go to the disability, but like that's it. When you decide, like, listen, I'm going to do something different. And like I see people here that are born here that are not doing jack. They're just sitting on a couch and not doing anything. And it's like, we have so much opportunity here to use. And that's, when immigrants do come here, they fight and try to make something of themselves. So they realize nothing's going to be handed to you. You don't speak the language. You're an outsider. No one cares about you. You got to really do something good to make stuff go. And all these people that did do that have made their way. And one note about I always tell people, naturalize the second you can naturalize. Yeah. And this guy should have done that. And because now they made the thing where you have two UIs that you can't naturalize anymore. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And with regards to military in particular, they made it so hard to naturalize when you're on base. They cleaned up and made less options for active duty officers to naturalize. And that was one of the first things that Jeff Sessions did when he came aboard, make it harder to naturalize when you're in the military, just having centers to help you with that. So it's an insane thing. I think you had a point you want to make. I interrupted.
Yeah, no, I think for me the additional point is simply the to remember that part of what it means to be American is to mess up, but to learn from those mistakes, right? Failure and redemption are two core aspects of the history of the United States. That's not unique to the United States. It's just because we're people. Right, yeah. We're a political community built by, for, and on behalf of human beings, fallible human beings, and so I think we have to remember that one person's failure does not make them worthy of turning our backs on them, because we're all people who have multiple failures in our own lives, and so it's not the failure that makes us better or worse. It's our willingness to recover from those failures, to try to redeem ourselves, to learn from that.
Yeah. That's such a beautiful thing you said. I think another aspect of what America is that ability to overcome mistakes. A lot of parts of the world, if you make a mistake, you're done, one and done. But America, the whole idea is you come here and you can rebuild yourself and become better from these mistakes. There's people who have had really horrible mistakes and they've overcome it and become great in this world. I mean, I see the actor, the guy who does Iron Man. The guy was like a crazy drug addict, and now he's like, everyone loves him and stuff like that. He came a long way from where he was. And so many musicians, athletes, were able to overcome. And the president had a bunch of bankruptcies, and that should be bring shame. In a lot of countries,
Right. Paul Manafort lied to the FBI and got convicted. His campaign chairman, Joe Arpaio, disobeyed a judge's orders, and got convicted, and then he got pardoned. Right. Those are political decisions made by the president, but as a moral matter, I think everyone should have the opportunity to redeem themselves. As a legal matter, I think that the executive should have the power to pardon some people. I may not have used it in that for those particular individuals, but that's fine. Like I get that when you give the executive the pardon power, you give the executive the pardon power.
It is, yeah.
Right, but I think that sort of sense of getting to start over, of having the ability to move on from one's past, is something that isn't reflected well in immigration law. Right, immigration law is very much an area of law in which we expect perfection, and we expect the extraordinary, as if we are a country full of extraordinary people. On the contrary, we're a country full of ordinary people. Right, and ordinary people sometimes can do great things.
It's just unrealistic, the expectation. I had a naturalization case where the guy had a jaywalking ticket from 20 years ago, and the officer held up the case until we get proof that they paid it. And luckily, the guy in his files found the jaywalking ticket. And I was just flabbergasted. I complained to the supervisor. They said, no, we're going to fix this. The supervisor never did. Eventually the guy found it, and I'm like, I didn't want to provide it because I'm like, this is so stupid. I don't think we should provide this. We got to challenge this. But the guy just wanted to get it done and get it over with.
Right.
It's like, dude, come on now. There's like, it's so unrealistic of a standard we have for human beings, and it really is. It's just not good when we look at other people like they're inhuman. And this is one of the reasons how we could go war willy-nilly. Right now with the issue with Iran, we paint people who are the enemies as this like evil devil. Where there might be a group there that's leading the place that's run amok, but this is like regular people just like us. I mean, I've seen these people. I help these people come here. There's especially Iran, the ease of which an Iranian could assimilate to the American community is so easy. One is they're Caucasian people. They look and adapt quickly. They speak English. A lot of educated people come here. It's really easy for them to adapt. But then they look like inhuman to make it easier to go to war there. And then the same thing with Central and South America, Mexicans. They make Mexicans out to be some sort of devil, which is just regular people. They're brown. So it's easier to put them in prison because it's like that. And you see the other side, overstays on Canada are the largest group by far, overstays. Where I had a Canadian guy where it was like, pissed me off. He came to consultation and he had like a lot of immigration history. He was like, well, I'm Canadian. It doesn't apply to me. What? And he wasn't willing to get police certificates. He's like, I don't need to do that. I'm Canadian. I'm like, what? And not to pick Canadians. Most of my clients are Canadians. They're really wonderful people, honest. But it's like, there is that mindset of, okay, they look different. They're not human. We could treat them like garbage and it's okay. And that's something we really, I mean, and that's the history of our country to a large extent, but that's a big challenge to change people's mindsets on that. We're doing our best.
Yeah, well, I would say to that gentleman's point, though, there is something to it in that, an overstaying is just as much an immigration law violation as Kiwi, right? Yeah. Right. Both of which violate immigration law, both of which can get you detained, both of which can get you removed. But the reality is, if we look at who's being locked up in immigration prisons, we're not filling those beds with a whole bunch of Canadians and Western Europeans, right, who came here on a visa waiver and then just never left, right? We're filling them up with Central Americans and Mexicans, right? And so we can't divorce the racial aspect, the class aspect, right? The fact that we're locking up poor people of color for violating immigration law, when the wealthy white people are also violating immigration law.
And the protections that we want are for them as well. And I hate making this about and you're not doing this at all, but like a white versus non-white kind of thing. It says like white people are bad or something like that. But it just goes to the stigma of being somewhat looking different from the controlling party when it's so unfair. When at the end of the day, the country's built on the back of people in this economic strata. These people who came here historically in this group, whether it be Italians, which were the Mexicans of the past, and they had to build up New York and the same. So it just does a disservice to our history to see whether it be even slavery, where they built up the country with, we free work for centuries almost. And to just like, oh no, none of that happened. None of these people are going to do anything. It's just not realistic. It's like, it's too dimensional to box these people in a group. And it gets me frustrated in that sense. I don't do any immigration removal and stuff like that. But my personal view, like we got to find a way to deal with this issue that's humane, because it takes away from our humanity. Like, to dive in another deeply divisive issue is when you look at the situation in Israel right now, where they're constantly at war. There's sides on this right now. Some people are pro-Palestinian, some pro-Israeli. My thing is, like, there needs to be peace, because the fact that Israelis on a 24/7 basis for their entire history are constantly have to fear about war and attacks coming in, it destroys their soul. So if there's incentives for them just to give in, just to compromise on something to clean it up, it's better. Because having your population constantly worried about being shot in the street deeply damages you psychologically. So my point in all this is, like, the damage that typical Americans have, somebody in Los Angeles living in Beverly Hills who doesn't deal with immigration, there is a psychological impact that they're going to have without them knowing it, because of the inhumaneness of the society that they're dealing with. And we really need to think about the psychological effects that has. I don't deal with a lot of immigrants and immigration, but that has a difference. I mean, the simplest thing is, listen, if you're getting picked up and you're going to be deported and you're stressed out, you might go to the bar and have an extra drink and drive home just because to loosen your nerves, because you're afraid of, you have cases where they're going to be, I have cases that are clean, going to be approved, but the people are freaking out because they see what Trump says. And they haven't happened to me, but they could easily go and have an extra drink at the bar just because they're stressing out about their interview tomorrow at USCIS, and then go hit somebody. So it's just like, we really need to calm down these tensions. There's enough problems with people having a hard time making money in this country because of the way the banks and everything is set up. Anything we do just to calm people down is the way. And I think everything's just being ratcheted up. And it's because it makes money. It's like the news cycle. Pushing war or pushing these kind of decisive issues sells ads. And that instinct, it just sucks. The yellow journalism and all that kind of just sucks.
Yeah, and I think for me, part of the motivation of writing Migrating to Prison is very much a desire to help people take a step back, to get a little bit more perspective on what it is that is driving people into the immigration prison system. What are the legal mechanisms? What are the human the policy decisions that are driving people, and what it is that we can do differently, how it is that we can do things differently, and hopefully reading the book gives people enough context to say, look, we do things the way we do things now because we've chosen to. And just the same way that we've chosen to do things this way, we can choose to do things in a radically different way.
You make the point that this incarceration stuff is new. It's not like this always been the case where we do this. This is like a
that's right. I mean, this really starts in the late 70s, early 1980s. After 25 years in which the federal government really didn't lock up many migrants. And so if we've gone from basically a no immigration prison system to one in which we house almost 500,000 people every year in the span of 40 years, that's my lifetime. So I'm hopeful that if we can build this in my lifetime, we can also deconstruct it in my lifetime. And so I hope that your listeners will take a look at the book and perhaps have that context with which to imagine a different way of doing things.
Thank you, César. I wasn't expecting to get as passionate and start having monologues in the middle of our interview as I did right now, but I'm getting more and more frustrated about just the way people treat people. And your book is soberly written in the sense that it's facts. You cite everything, which is, it's a hard thing to write a book and constantly cite everything because it's annoying to do that. But that's a real scholarly book. It's always all these footnotes, end notes in there. What's the best place people would go to buy? What's your preference of where they go to? Is it just Amazon or their website to get it? Or?
Yeah, I think look at your local bookstore. If they don't have it, they should be able to order it for you. I think I'm a big supporter of bricks and mortars, independent bookstores. If that's not a feasible option for you, Amazon has it. So you just type in the title, Migrating to Prison, and it'll come up that way.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. César, before we leave, what's the best way people could contact you if they want to reach out?
Crimmigration.com. Just visit the website and all my information's available there. I'm also on Twitter, Crimmigration, Instagram, and Facebook and such. And you can keep up with what's happening in this world that way.
Stay on the line before we go, but I just want to again thank you for coming on, and I hope the listeners enjoy this.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, John.